Sweet. All right, we are live with this new webinar. I'm excited to have you all tonight if you're in Europe, or in the morning if you're in the US and Canada. I saw someone already tuned in from California. Welcome to a new series that we're doing, which is SEO for busy bloggers, which is something that Anton and I decided to do after doing a very nice Q&A panel last summer, and we basically want to bring the format back. And so today we're going to have an interactive panel discussion about managing content for SEO. And I have three panelists that are going to share their wisdom with you and with us today. And the reason why this obviously matters is because there's so much to content production. There's a series of stakeholders. There's your writers, there are the SEOs, there are the content marketers, the brand experts, the overall marketing strategy. And so on the one hand, we have SEO tools giving us a bunch of keyword recommendations. And on the other hand, we have our entire team, clients, and expectations to manage. And so today we want to learn from some experts how they bridge the gap, how they turn keywords into ideas, how they write content, how they manage the content writing process, and how they get their blogs and websites going. And so my name is Viola. I'm the host today. I'm running an agency called Flow SEO. And first things, I will introduce the panelists to you. And Sophie, you're in my top left corner, so I'm just randomly picking you to start. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you know about managing content and what brought you here today.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. So I'm tuning in from Évora in Portugal. I've always kind of been a writer, so I went from working for a press agency to being an in-house copywriter at a publishing house. And then in 2012, I launched my own travel blog, which I've been running full-time ever since. And then I also started taking on clients to do content strategy for. And over the last year, I've kind of switched from travel into digital marketing and communication niches, where I do anything from initial keyword research to creating briefings, outlines, writing the content, and also optimizing existing content. That's
Sweet.
For me.
Thanks for having being with us today. I appreciate it. Yeah, I see we have
for inviting me.
Dinner coming from Atlanta. So yeah, please pop in the chat where you're calling in from. Also let us know what's your role. Are you a content manager or a blogger? We're super curious. And then Billie, please let us know who you are.
Hi, I'm Billie. I'm a senior account manager at an agency called the SEO Works, and I do SEO and blogging, and outside of that, I am a blogger myself. So I used to be a food blogger, and I did that for like 3 or 4 years, and then gave up on that, and then I've restarted again, and now I blog about blogging and marketing and things like that, and I specialize in basically anything in SEO, so content creation, research, keyword mapping, to technical SEO. That's it for me.
Sweet. Thanks for joining in today. And then Cecilien, let us know who you are and what got you here.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Cecilien. I'm calling from Montreal, Canada. I'm the head of SEO at Mailbird. I've been in the SEO industry since 2014 now. Really excited to be here today. So my expertise lies in SEO strategy and really making sure that all aspects of SEO from a technical standpoint, content, UX, and also mobile optimization are combined to support the growth of the business I'm working with.
Sweet. Good to have you too. And hello to Ohio as well, where someone is tuning in from. And Mongolia, that's impressive. So I kind of want to know more about this. Hans, please let us know what got you there. So basically, as you can see, we're trying to split we're trying to get different perspective and different viewpoints on this panel, from the managing perspective, from in-house to agency to bloggers. And I think that's going to give us an interesting overview of how different people look at creating content from an SEO perspective. And I want to kick this off by asking the three of you, each one kind of to outline what is the major challenge that you see in content production in your role specifically? And then how do you account for that, or what do you do about this? And maybe this time we go reverse, so Cecilien, I will have you start.
Sure. So I guess for me, working for a startup, it's really making sure that we don't forget our voice, our brand, as a business, and understanding, like, beyond the search intent itself when you do SEO, why does this topic matter to you, and why does this matter to your audience? Because if you start losing sight of that, it's really hard to come up with an angle. And today in SEO, if you don't have an angle for your content, it's pretty hard to compete with the top search results. So yeah, it's really making sure about knowing what's our value and what value we can add to the conversation. So really making sure that the content that you develop is true to your brand. And I believe that can really make a difference in the long run. And also because it's going to help you define your topics and the topic clusters that you want to dominate in your space. So yeah, I'm solving that by making sure that starting with the leadership, everyone is aligned and keep communicating internally what we sell, who we are, who are our ideal customers, and yeah, what are our strengths.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think the SEO for a long time has been very keyword focused, and we just grab the keyword and then we slap something on there that has the keyword, but we haven't really been talking as much about style and nuance and what we stand for. So I appreciate you bringing this up. And by the way, yeah, quick reminder on everyone tuning in, definitely feel free to pop your questions into the chat, because we're reading the chat and we want to hear from you. And so let us know all your questions related to this. And then over to you, Billie. What do you see as the main challenge in your role, and how do you account for that?
So very similar. So a lot of keyword saturation at the minute. Everybody's targeting the same keywords. Our competitors are, and just random businesses are. And it's there's a lot going on, and it's to really make sure my clients or my own voice is standing out above that. So really focusing on providing actually helpful, beneficial content that fits the user's intent, making sure that the keyword I'm targeting is actually, my content is going to match that. That's probably the biggest challenge in SEO at the moment, is standing out from all the millions of voices. Agreed
very much. Sofie, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, mine is a bit more of a general one, I guess. I'd say my biggest challenge, and then especially coming from a writing perspective, is client ambitions versus resources. And with resources, I don't necessarily mean budget, although that's one part of it. Like, someone may be wanting to publish 6 quality articles a month, but it may not have the budget to do so. But it's also resources in terms of time and people. So what I often see happening is a client ordering a content strategy, but then having it sit there for 6 months and not actually get to work on writing the articles, or someone who orders a bunch of articles, but then never gets to publishing them. So what I do before I take on any project or new client is really map out the timeline, not just for the work that I'm going to do for them, but how that work fits into their calendar, and which parts they can take on, and where maybe I can offer to do a little bit more for them. So, for example, if that's a client ordering a content strategy, if after a month I notice, like, hey, I've seen you haven't really published anything yet, can I maybe help you out with that as well? Or is there something that you're stuck in that you need more of an explanation on? I think oftentimes there's this idea of like, oh, we want to step up our content game, but they've only thought about the first step that they need to take, and not about the time that all the next steps are going to require.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a big part of managing this entire content process, because obviously having a list of topics in a spreadsheet is one thing, and then getting them live on your website, there's many moving parts and many people who need to be involved to get that done.
Yeah.
Which actually brings me to a good point. So firstly, someone in the comments was asking, Cecilien, what you mean by topic clusters. So I want to start basically by the basics, right? So we're in our SEO tool, we're in SEMrush, we're doing our keyword research, and we're finding some keywords that we think have interesting search traffic, that are relevant to our business, and we have something to say about it, and it's maybe a difficulty that we feel achievable. So how does that look like? What do you look for in your keyword research, and how do you then turn it into a topic cluster or content idea? And how do we take it from all that information into something that actually becomes a strategy?
Yeah, so like you said, it's pretty important to know what you stand for as a business and what are the different topics that you can address with either like your knowledge, experience, or the product or service itself that you sell. And from there, let's say we are an SEO agency, we want to talk about SEO. One topic clusters can be content related to SEO, right? So like from that, you're going to define a topic cluster usually it's made of what we call a pillar page. That's going to be your main converting page at the center of it. And around that, you're going to build like some pages that are going to be satellites that are going to address different keywords around that topic. So part of your keyword research is also defining the different pages and the different search intent that you need to address for that specific topic. And from there, you can build your topic clusters around that main keyword that you want to rank for. So I invite you to read more about that because it can go like quite deep but it's really interesting concept that today you need to apply to your SEO strategy.
Yeah, right. And I think if you Google this, so I think topic cluster, pillar pages, hub page, sometimes you hear the term silo, which probably all of them have a little bit like different nuances on what they specifically mean, but they point at a similar story, which that is you need that main thing, but you also need that context around it in order to be relevant in the eyes of Google. And that's I think a forgotten point often in keyword research. Like we focus on all of our target pages and we forget to create supporting pages or satellite pages to actually help them rise to the top. I'm curious, maybe Sofie or Billie, if you have any thoughts on when you do keyword research, how do you know this is something worthwhile going after? Like, how do you know something is a good idea and you want to do it? What do you look for?
I personally always Google the thing that I want to my keyword, and I see what the top 10 pages are. Sometimes I'll go even deeper and go like 20 or 30, and I look at what these people that are already ranking for these are doing. And I look at how often they are using the keywords. I like to try and just figure out what Google has found in these other sites and what it is liked for this keyword. And I just try and replicate that. I also try to provide additional value. So if I go on 10 pages and none of them have a supporting graphic or anything like that, an infographic, I'll bob one of them in as well. Like I'll just try and expand on what's already there to just make sure it's top notch.
Yeah, in terms of choosing, like, do I first go for keyword A that I found or keyword B, for example? For me, it comes down to a few things. Like one is also competitor research to really get an idea of this keyword and the content that's already ranking around that. Is that in line with my client's goals? Because it can be a very good keyword and they might be able to rank for it, but if it's not something that's really in line with the brand, like Cecilien pointed out, I might not prioritize it. Another thing I look for, especially if it's a client that maybe has a site that's not ranking that well yet, is low-hanging fruit. Like, A, is this keyword relevant to them? B, can they easily rank for it? Even though it might have a lower search volume, for example, then I will often prioritize that as well. So yeah, like Cecilien said, is it on brand? And then how hard is it, basically?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious, I'm just going to throw this at the three of you. So whoever feels called to answer this, please let me know. So when you have your keyword and you chosen, like, this is the one I'm going after, either for yourself or someone else that you're managing, what do you put in your content briefing? And this is obviously a huge assumption because I assume you give people more than the keyword. Maybe you just give them the keyword, but I'm kind of curious, what do you give the content team or what do you give yourself as a writer to take it from a keyword to an article?
I'll go first, maybe, because I'm on both sides. And Viola, you and I have worked together, and my briefings are actually very similar to the ones that I know you do at Flow as well. So it's the main keywords, secondary keywords that I found were interesting, competing articles, but also articles that I found through my own research that I think have relevant background information. search intent combined with the type of article I'm looking for. So for example, do I want it to be an informational listicle, or do I want it to be more like a this is how you do it step-by-step article? Any notes that I know, for example, the client is looking more for this kind of tone of voice, or a link to a style sheet if they have one. I think those are the main ones. Yeah, maybe I've forgotten something, but those are the main points. Also target audience, but usually what I try to do with every client is have a separate doc for their ideal customer profile and their style guide, and then I will just link to that from the briefing.
I pretty much do the same. The only difference I do is, again, when I've Googled the keyword, I'll look and see if there's any people also asked boxes and include the questions on there. If there's not, I'll jump on SEMrush and do using the keyword magic tool. I'll see if I'll type my keyword in and see what questions pop up there as well. And I like to try and include those in my brief.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so same thing here. I really like to really dive into the search results that are already ranking for this and understand the search intent behind it. Really look at the structure of these articles first, so that I can come up with my own that makes sense to my brand as well. On top of what you guys said, what I started introducing is actually what's going to be the emotional connection that we are trying to address here, because for example, people want to avoid, criticism, trouble, discomfort, embarrassment. So we're trying to identify what sort of angle, what sort of story we can add to that page that we're going to create, and what is on top of solving that search intent, what are we addressing in terms of the story itself? So that's something that I started adding to my outlines as well.
I'd like to add two things, if I can. Word count is an important one for me as well. And then from a writer perspective, if you're the client creating briefings, consistency is so important. Because for me, every time a briefing looks differently or the information is organized in a different way, I need to go back to you, because I don't want to make assumptions about what you as the client want, which means there's an extra back and forth required, there's extra communication required. Whereas if your briefing is always the same format, and you say okay, this is how I indicate my primary keyword, this is how I indicate what search intent needs to be, and it's always the same, I can just instantly start writing, and we speed up the process basically.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. It's decreasing friction, essentially. And I think one interesting thing that you said is related to style guide. And I want to talk about that in a second, kind of what in all of your experience, what kind of documents do you want or need, whether it's brand guidelines, style sheet, tone of voice document, etc. How formal do you have that? Is that something that you kind of create verbally? Is that something you have in a written form, and how do you prefer it? I'd be curious to understand that part of the equation, especially because you all talk so much about brand, and so I want to see where that fits in.
I'm probably a little bit cheeky when it comes to brand guidelines. So yes, I'll try to stick to tone of voice and try and get the right messaging across. However, I've found quite a lot in brand guidelines is specific ways they prefer things to be written to give off a certain personality of the business. So they might be a sports retailer and you to use sports puns kind of as you write, and I just straight up refuse to do that, because that doesn't fit how Google will see the content. They don't understand that this is brand related, and it could be affecting the search terms people are using, so that your content's not getting found. And yes, it's fun to bring in the personality, and it's great to show that you're not just some boring company that's like everybody else, but you've also got to think about how people are finding your content. If you're trying to be too quirky, you're probably not going to bring in as much traffic, because you're not ranking for the things you're trying to rank. And it's okay to be like, no, I'm not doing that, and push back. And it doesn't always go down well, but
yeah, I think probably also depends on the type of content that you're creating, where you fully want to tune it up, maybe as a thought leadership piece or opinion piece, etc., and you fully want to kind of like do a brand play on this, when maybe with a guide it's more appropriate to have a more calmer SEO piece. I don't know, Sofie, Cecilien, I don't know if you want to add something to the kind of like brand guide discussion.
Yeah, for me it works both ways. So I have some clients who have a very clear like style guide document, and these are our avatars, and then I work with that. Sometimes I just compile my own through conversations with the clients, and usually what I do, and actually also with the briefings I receive, is I have my own format for everything. So I take the information that I get from a client and I put it in templates that I use just for me, because they make it easier for me to write. But yeah, it really depends. If a client has a very clear style guide, I'll use that. If they don't, we'll hop on a call and I'll get the information that I need, and I just write out my own one.
I'm curious, actually, for both of you, maybe Sofie for your travel blog and Billie for your food blog, did you have a sort of like brand guideline for yourself when you're writing for yourself, or did that depend on what mood you were in that day, or did you have a very clear picture what the blog was meant to be like?
Billie, do you want to go first?
I'm not organized enough to ever have my own tone of voice. I just wrote, and it didn't necessarily all make sense there. Now with my new blog, I kind of just try to take a kind of leadership tone with it, but I don't really do anything in particular. I just write and then put it out for the world to see and just hope for the best.
I think it's maybe a bit more obvious, right? Because it's also in your personal name, etc. So you don't have to twist into a specific style. It's really you.
I did do it when I started outsourcing content for the blog, because up until then, it's like you say, I was writing from my tone of voice, right? It was a personal blog. But then when I started outsourcing content, I realized that, I always use this specific word, but I would never say that, for example. So my style guide was very general in the sense that like, it's personal, it's conversational, but I had very specific things on like, use this word, but not that. Use bullet points in this way, not that way. So there were little things that made my content mine rather than a specific tone of voice, I would say.
Right.
And those I have a document for, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, like you're saying, Sophie, I think you start to realize the necessity for brand guidelines as you grow and scale your content production, because the more you get people on board, even as a business, the more you're going to feel the friction of like people trying to know what are we doing, like who are we, what's our tone of voice, like how should we address, who are our customers, what do they look like. So yeah, we use at Mailbird, we use brand style, brand guidelines, and buyer personas as well. That's very important, I believe.
Yeah, and I think some things you also notice only when they go wrong. Like I notice it sometimes with clients as well. They'll have a style guide, but then I will deliver an article that's written in a certain way, and it may have one sentence that's not really addressed in their style guide, but they're like, actually, we would probably not say it that way. And it's the same the way around. Like when I started hiring writers, I needed to learn like, other people would actually use this word, but I would never. So I need to add this to my style guide. I think a style guide or like brand guidelines are a work in process, and you define more and more what your brand is as you create more content.
Yeah, I was going to say like your brand is a living thing, right? So like branding guidelines shouldn't be like a static document, and it shouldn't be like, it's out there, please read it and apply it, you're going to forget about it. It should be like a cultural thing within your business. Yeah.
I think the classic, Sofie, which you probably know, is like in our team, we have no clarity if the thing is focus keyword or main keyword. So depending who you talk to, you're sometimes getting a focus keyword, sometimes you get a secondary keyword, sometimes you get a supporting keyword. And we're struggling getting like a clear communication in that regard. But actually, I have a couple of interesting client questions, chat questions coming in, not client question coming in, chat question coming in, related to actually writing the content. And I think both of them have a similar background. So I'll start with the one from Sabrina D. And she says, so firstly, this is about content production, right? So we have our briefing, we're ready, blank page, cursors blinking. And she's asking, how do you stay consistent with writing content, especially if you're busy or uninspired?
I don't. If it's for myself and I don't have the time, I just try my best to write something, but it doesn't always happen. And when I've been uninspired, what I tend to do is just write something that's not related to anything, just to kind of get myself in a bit of a flow of it. And so I might just write something that's completely not my niche that I don't plan on sharing. But I do find it kind of helps me get those creative juices like flowing a bit. But I know for people that like blog as a business or are businesses with a blog, it is important to keep that consistency, but it's not everything. You've always got to do the best for you. And if you've managed to build up a community, like reach out and ask. Like that's what I've been doing for the last couple of months, is asking people to help me. Well, I say a couple of months, it's for the next couple of months, but I've been asking friends and people that I know who love to write but don't have the platform to create content for me. It's worked out well, and there's never any harm in doing that.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to the question, right? One is what if you're busy, two is if you're uninspired. Right. Busy, this is not going to be a popular reply, but I think it's a priority or it isn't. So just like with anything else, either you block out time, like literally take a block of time on your calendar, and this is your content creation block, and it doesn't move almost regardless of what happens. Uninspired, I think with the keyword tools like SEMrush that we have now, it's not possible to be maybe uninspired in the sense of unmotivated, but you literally do a search and you have 100 of ideas, right? Whether then it's easy to get started writing on them is a different story. And for me, I feel like when I struggle writing is when I think I need to go from A to Z instantly. It's when I have a blank page and I need to start writing a finished article. So for me, what I do in that case is I break it down into mini steps, right? I do the research first and I make notes. Based on the notes, I make an outline. The outline is all little sections, and all I need to do is put the information that I know I want to write about into the little sections. Or I might take keywords from the briefing and be like, okay, that keyword, I'm definitely going to put in that section, or that internal link is definitely going to go in that section. And you just add to it. And then if I'm still a little bit stuck, what I end up with is usually an outline with a bunch of information that's not like a flowy, consistent text. I leave it for a day or two and I let it sit and I get back to it. And basically all you need to do then is take everything you already have and make a nice text out of it. I don't know how to put it differently, but the idea is that you don't go from scratch to a full article. You take it bit by piece and you just add to it and you make progress on the text until it's finished. It sounds maybe simple, but that's what works for me. Basically, don't try to do everything at once.
Yeah. I can relate with that. I also earlier this year started publishing on a personal blog again. And obviously being an SEO and knowing page one, I kind of was under the assumption that everything that I write need to be a 2,000 word guide. And then I also had to kind of like relieve myself from the own pressure that I put on myself. And I'm like, sometimes it's okay to have like a short kind of like snappy thing, and not every piece that I'm writing needs to be a super long form guide. And then trying to break it down and giving myself also credit for shorter paragraphs or shorter articles definitely has been very helpful. I'm super curious because this ties into this, because the next question is this: is the panel using AI content tools? And if so, when and how are you incorporating them into your content creation process? And I don't know how much you follow. There's probably a big one is copy.ai, etc. There are tools now who can AI generate content for you. Some of them can write full articles, some write intros, some can write page titles, etc. So yeah, I'm actually very curious on your answers on this and on your thoughts on using them and where you use them if you do.
Sorry, Cecilien.
No, I was going to say I never used any on the content generation side, but on the content, I'm going to say optimization side, or like to improve your readability, like the sort of AI that helps you define a score, like a performance score for your content. Yeah, I have a couple like this, but maybe you want to say something first, Billie, on the content generation side, since that's what we're talking about.
Well, I don't particularly always trust the content generated ones. I'd much rather write something myself. I'm also not a fan of the tools that like do give you the scores and stuff. In particular, I'm not going to name the brand, but there's one on WordPress that you can get, and it gives you like a traffic light score, and I really just don't like that because it just depends. I don't think I couldn't have made that more obvious, could I? But yeah, I don't like that just because I think what you write really depends, and it's not the readability. Yeah, it's probably pay attention to that a bit more, but with your content that you've created for SEO scores, I don't trust that. But one AI that I have recently used a free trial for was the Google's language AI. And I've been doing quite a lot of international work in the past and stuff. And I just wanted to see what it'd be like, how it works when I write something, run it for a translation, like any of the tools that do that, and then put it in there to see how it would actually function in that country. And yeah, I found that really like interesting and cool to use. But again, I wouldn't rely on it for creating content. Just write it yourself. It'll always be better.
Yeah, I agree. I've experimented with some just because I wanted to see what they could do. I think maybe more if you're like an affiliate marketer and you need to pump out a bunch of content and you're more interested in the quantity than the quality, it can offer a good starting point. But aside from, let's say, the quality in general, what I find with these tools is that they're not human. So what you lack, like Cecilien pointed to before, is that emotional aspect. What do you want to make the reader feel? And that is something that you cannot really input yet into those tools. And also the information that they gather and then spit out again, basically in a different form, may not always convey what you want it to convey. Like it can be correct, but it won't be on brand, or it's the opposite of the opinion that you as a client want to express. So I've played with them, but I much prefer writing myself from scratch.
Yeah, I think we all agree on the fact that you can't rely on it. You might be using it just like to get you started on something, but yeah, I believe right now it would be a dangerous game in terms of SEO to rely on such tools fully, like blindly. But yeah, personally, I still use Hemingway for readability scores, but yeah, when it comes to generating new content, no, I'd rather avoid these tools for now.
Yeah, I like Hemingway too. I'll name one which is probably like semi-AI, but it's also more editing. I think, for example, if you're using Grammarly, like I'm still stumbling on a lot of things as a non-native English speaker, where it tells me to kind of like say it's slightly different, and I think those are probably fair assistance in your content production. And then I also have a headline analyzer, because I realize I have like the habit of writing a very factual headline. And so the headline analyzer helps me to kind of like with the sentiment and hype it up a little bit more. And I do think some of these tools are quite fun to work with. And actually the only purpose I found for the kind of like really like AI writing content is that when I'm so uninspired that I don't even know how to start the intro, I sometimes let it like generate an intro just to get like an idea. But I don't think it's like, I agree with the other ones that it's probably not, you're probably not getting where you want it to be if you have it like fully written and then just pop it up there without giving it any manual love. All right. Maybe because we're in content production and I kind of just quickly want to close the loop on a couple of things, and then I want to come back a little bit to talking scaling content productions and content calendars. But what do you guys use to kind of like SEO check, spell check, editing, etc.? How does your process there look like? How do you make sure that the draft that you've written actually is like pixel perfect on how you want it to be published?
So I write with all the checklists and the guidelines and everything that I need basically alongside my research and my Google Docs. So I try to take everything into account while I'm writing. And then I usually leave a night or two before I start the editing process. And then I have either my own SEO checklist or the client's SEO checklist, which would be, the usual things like have the keywords in the H2s, use a call to action or whatever. So I go through these. For style, the style guide, and then for typos, Grammarly as well. Because even though I write fluent English, I find, it's easy to make a typo or to miss a double spacing, for example, and Grammarly is great at pointing those things out.
I have a bit of a similar process. So my first thing is I've finished my content, and then I don't look at it for a day or two. And then normally when I look at it again, I'm like, oh, this is terrible, and I fix it as I edit. And then the tools I use Grammarly as I'm writing it, and then I put it through Hemingway afterwards just to see. I don't pay for Grammarly, so this points out the issues that misses. So my long sentences and things like that. And I find that really helpful. A really cool life hack that I never thought of until recently is if you're editing content that someone else has done with double spaces, in your Word document, just find and replace to get rid of all the double spaces. I don't know why it took me so long to do that one, but it's just a nice little tip.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. Usually I rely a lot on the outline at first. So like in terms of SEO check, to me, like 90% should be in the outline before the draft. When it comes to like spelling, I have the chance to have a proofreader for that. And also like the content team, usually we have someone that review. We have like 2 stages of reviews before any content gets published. So yeah, I rely a lot on that.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Nice. And this maybe also these steps that you're taking maybe also feed in the next question, which is kind of like taking us back and forward at the same time, which is a question from the audience. And it is, could you kind of like share your content calendars? Like how detailed are they? Do you use a spreadsheet? Do you have a software? What do you prefer and why? So yeah, how does that look like, your content calendar? And actually super curious if you have a tool for this, because full disclosure, mine is still in a spreadsheet. So I'm always curious to learn more.
Same, I love my spreadsheet.
I see many hands raising for the spreadsheet.
Yeah, I think it's the most customizable way to do it. So I can't pull it up right now, but mine is basically if you would say per topic cluster, I have an overview tab, which has all of my main keywords. I think I also add like search volume for my target country, as well as some general notes. And then every main keyword links through to a separate tab. And there I basically have a link to my briefing, as well as a list of like top competitors, internal linking IDs that I have, external linking IDs that I have, like anything that's extra that I usually create that first, and then I base the briefing off of that. So it will have top competitors, secondary keywords, ideas for headings, but not really research, just like while I'm brainstorming. Internal, external linking ideas. And then as I go along, I add in like deadlines or publication dates into the main overview tab as well. But then basically once I have my briefings created or the outlines, then I move to those. So my content calendar is really the first step. And then when I have of that, I base my briefings off the content calendar, and my deadlines go into, I use Asana for project management, go into Asana and they link to my briefings, and I'll add my deadlines in there. I don't know if that's very clear, but basically to answer the question, I use a spreadsheet.
Nice. Yeah, well, but you have a project management tool integration, which I think is an interesting part.
Yeah.
Billie, how does it look like for you, Content Canvas? And actually, interesting point, Content Canvas / managing the process. How does that tie it together for you?
So it's a spreadsheet. I feel like that's every SEO's go-to is a spreadsheet. My content calendar is probably less of a calendar and just more of so I start from the keyword map that we do right at the beginning of any campaign. I've got all my keywords. I know what pages are connected to them. And then I'll do research into when those keywords peak, and then create a bit of a calendar off the back of that. So if I know content starts peaking on one of the keywords in July, I will have my content ready and published for like April, May. I tried to give myself 2 months to start working my way up the rankings. And then I also look at the business I'm writing for as a whole. So if I know they're a weather client or a travel client, I'll look at like the peaks of where people are traveling, so I make sure everything's updated. I do that 6 months in advance, and every content calendar I do is completely different. I think you need that adaptability, and yeah, I just swear by doing it on a spreadsheet because you can just change it so quickly.
So same here, team spreadsheet. From what I heard, I pretty have much of the same content calendar than Sophie. In terms of the columns that I used, we have the briefing, we have the topic clusters, we have who's going to write because we have a team of writers. And one thing that we have also is like we assign different deadlines for the different stages of the content. So like, when is the outline going to be ready? When is the first review going to be done? When is the proofreading going to be done, etc., until we set the date for the publication. And we also use Asana as a project management tool. So in the spreadsheet itself, each piece has a code that we can search easily on Asana to identify like where is it on the board that we use in terms of progress. So that's about it.
Nice. Which makes me want to kind of like get like a summarize, because we talked about like a lot of tools here, right? Could you maybe just each kind of like list out what are probably the main tools that you're using for that entire process? So on my end, that's probably like SEO tools, SEMrush, spreadsheet, then Asana, probably Grammarly, Google Doc. Those are probably kind of like the main things that I'm using. But I'm curious, what's your content production tech stack, and what is your can never live without? And someone also asked the headline tool that I use is from CoSchedule.
Yeah, I think my stack looks pretty much the same. I heavily use Google Sheets and Google Docs. For some of my clients, I work in so for my own project management, I work in Asana, but a lot of my clients work in Trello, which is kind of the same, but more based on Kanban boards. So that's another option. And then for optimization work, some clients also like me to use Surfer SEO. So that's another one. I might also use it as preparatory work when I'm doing the outline or to optimize the article further. But other than that, it's pretty much the same as yours, Viola.
Billie, do you want to go next? We seem to have like an order now in which you respond. If you want to switch that up, that's also allowed. But Billie, please go next.
Can you come back to me? Because I'm trying to think of the name of a tool and it's not coming to me, and I use it every single day.
Yes.
So I'm so sorry.
All good, all good. Yeah.
Okay.
Cecilien, you go first.
Yeah. So if we start from the top of the funnel, I'm gonna say I use a lot, obviously, like Analytics, Search Console to start identifying like which pages need the most update, or like which keywords can we go after. I use also Screaming Frog for the technical side of things and understanding also like the type of content optimization I can make for each page. So then it's going to be SEMrush a lot, Asana, Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets. I like to use Venngage, which is an infographic maker, to turn the content into like visual assets as well. And then, it's going to be a lot of more on the technical side of things. So like Lighthouse, page speed insights, etc. But it's more like related to once it's published.
Right. Nice.
It's called Zapier. The tool that I couldn't remember. And I love that. So if I'm working across several spreadsheets, I set up various zaps so it just moves the information to where I need it to be. I can set it up to connect to my emails. It just makes things so much easier. And I can also set it up to send myself reminders, which I definitely need. And in terms of other tools, I use Screaming Frog as well. I use that a lot to pull out the data of all the H1s that already exist. And then in a spreadsheet, use them to like quickly concatenate for meta titles and meta descriptions, and like just save myself time with that constantly. And visually wise, I use Canva. I was always like, I'd rather use Photoshop, and now you can't get me off Canva. I don't have to do anything, and it's there, and it's great. So those are really good tools, and I recommend having them.
Nice. Yeah, I appreciate that. As we're kind of like quick coming towards like the last 15 minutes, also quick announcement for the audience. Please feel free to ask further questions in the comment sections. We'll answer them. And there's one more I want to talk about from Angelique, which is more related to resourcing, which is what I kind of want to spend some time on. So that is like resourcing, obviously, time, team, writers, etc. Does it work? And she basically says like, how do we even begin to pitch that we need time to get the blog right and the resources to get it right? And she says that she does have a reporting, but the return can be slow. So how do you make a compelling argument for investing into the blog? And kind of like, how do we also make an argument that SEO has a lag time and that content actually has a return on investment? So I'm kind of curious if you have any, if we have any ideas on that in our panel today.
Yeah, I can start. So SEO, when you work for a company, is a lot of education. It takes time, and I think you need to find the right balance between also, it all starts with the business goals, right? So like you have yearly business goals, you have quarterly business goals, monthly business goals. So from there, you need to understand how content can fit into that. So I'm going to give you an example. If we have ambitious and aggressive short business goals that are really ambitious, I might focus my time more on content updates, content pruning, and content distribution rather than creating everything from scratch. So I might dedicate 70% of the time for my content team to focus on that, and 30% to focus on the more like the bigger investment that is content marketing when it comes to SEO. If in terms of business goals, this is more like still ambitious, but I have more time to develop my topic clusters. I have more time to create some new content, some unique pieces. That's going to also define my content calendar in a certain direction.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think as well, in terms of making sure that the person that you're working for, your client, any brands you're working with as a blogger, they need to realize that everything in SEO takes time. It takes time to write the blog post, and the more support you can give the writer to create that great content, the better it's going to do for you. And then once it is published on your site, just keep trying to remind them that SEO, like, it's very rare something will rank number 1 or number 2 or like number 30 within a day or two. It's really rare for that to happen. I always say it takes around 6 months to actually rank for something. If we're not starting to see movements within 3 months, it means we probably need to address the content we've already created. As much as we feel like we've mastered SEO and we know what we're doing, but there's no set rules, and every niche and every business and every website has different aspects that'll make it rank and make it not rank. And I know it's so hard to get anyone who's not an SEO to understand that we can't make any promises. And I think that's something that we need to do more as an industry, is not make promises, and just say, like, I know we all hate it, but it does depend, and we just have to say it depends. If you can give us all the resources we need, it's like we'll achieve these goals, but we can't promise you anything. And we've just got to keep the business in love with SEO. I always think as soon as like you start making promises and not meeting them, whoever you're working with starts to distrust SEO. And honesty is going to get you much further than hoping for the best and lying a little bit.
Yeah, I like that, right? It's also related to part of the goals or expectations that you want to be setting are around progress and things that you can control. Like, I mean, if you're never publishing an article, you're probably also not ranking. And so having a commitment to writing it is one of your best bets to eventually ranking. But separating between what are progress goals that we can control, like placing internal links, like publishing articles, to a degree doing distribution and backlinks, and then the things that are success that is not fully in our control, that is the rankings, that is the traffic, etc., that come from it. Actually, okay, let me do a quick promo announcement here because it kind of fits. We're going to be talking about this in depth in the next panel that we're doing on the 13th of July, which is very much about forecasting. Can we measure return on investment? If so, how does that look like? Is that even a thing? So if you're interested in that specifically, tune in on the 13th of July. And with that, Cecilien, back to you.
Yeah, no, I was going to say one last advice that I have regarding that, because that's still a mistake that I see a lot, is don't forget about your old content. Like, because I still see a lot of writers just clicking publish and pray for the best and just like waiting for things to happen. And it might happen to like, okay, you're ranking on, I don't know, the second page or something like that. But wow, like the initial goal was obviously to get traffic from it, to get visibility. So don't forget to come back to it and really understand how you can make it better. Like on which type of keywords did you nail it, and on which ones you didn't reach your goal, and really constantly like think about how you can update and make it better. Yeah.
Nice. So perfect. To kind of like stay on the topic of resources and internally pitching, I want to talk a little bit about the process of hiring writers and how to make that decision. And actually, Sofie, I'm curious because your travel blog was your personal project and you've been writing for it. And I'm curious, when did you make the decision to hire a writer, and how did you know that that was the right thing for you to do and that you wanted to do?
Basically, when I got too busy to do it all myself. So running the blog at one point, you know, when it's just you're the marketeer and you're the SEO and you're the writer and you're the salesperson. And the longer and the more professional I started doing it, the less time I felt I had to dedicate to solely content creation. And because my blog was personal, but it wasn't a lifestyle blog. I wasn't the center of it. It was the destinations. I felt that I could outsource more informational research-based type of articles while still doing the articles that were about my own travels myself. So that's why I was okay with it. And then why I decided to do it was basically because I needed to free up time. And at that moment, I felt like outsourcing. I already had a VA and I already had someone helping with social media. So the next easiest thing for me to outsource, I thought, was the writing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, so we have like about 5 minutes to kind of talk about this. And I know it's a complex topic, but I would like to gauge all of your opinion. What do you look for when hiring a writer? And how do you... What does your process look like to get the right writer, and how do you know if you've got it right?
So first, I will say I will identify like two types of writers. That there are like the content writers that are experienced in many industries that can write a lot of volume, but not necessarily have the knowledge of your industry at first. So you need to educate them. You need to make sure that they understand like what you're selling, the branding, etc. And you also have what I call the subject matter experts. So these ones might be less on the market, but if you can identify them, especially if you're in the B2B space, I believe this is more like the type of content writer that you need is someone that is really experienced and that can bring their knowledge, their experience in your content. When it comes to like selecting them, I'm gonna look at how they present the topic. So I'm gonna put them to the test, and I want to see if they present the topic in an engaging way. Sorry, are they trying to connect with the readers right from the beginning? Can I hear them? Like, is there a voice to the topic, or is just like a bunch of words on a blank page? I really want to make sure that they understand also like the basics of SEO, obviously, and like what sort of emotion they are able to convey via their writing. That's really important, without like using all caps or like exclamation marks everywhere. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
For me, both when I'm deciding to work with a client as a writer or when I'm trying to hire someone myself, either for a writer that I will need to work with or for my own website, how communicative they are is super important to me. Like, I need someone who is able to ask questions when something is unclear, who can communicate with me if for any reason like a deadline is in jeopardy. So aside from like the quality of the writing and their knowledge about the industry, when I hire someone and I have them do a test job, for example, I will always leave out information. I will always do something that ideally they will have to get back to me to ask a question, ask for clarification, so that I know that they're able to do that and that they don't just assume what the best way is to do the job, or that they're too scared to ask for a question. Because especially since I think we're all working remotely, or most of us are working remotely, so it's super important to be able to send a very clear email or even a voice message if necessary to make sure the job gets done.
I like that a lot.
Oh, and one I can add, this is maybe personal, I often look for detail-oriented people. And so my name, Sophie, is written with an F, whereas in most countries it's written with PH. So usually when someone is an applicant for a job and they go like, "Hi, Sophie," with PH, I'm like, you're out. Maybe that's a little rough, but it is something I use.
No, I like that.
I think you have the test built in. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Billie, do you have anything that you look for when hiring for your team?
So I'm not really involved within the recruitment where I work, but when I have sent through recommendations to people, I always ask for a bit of a portfolio. Like, I want to see that people that I'm suggesting can have a range. Like, if they send me 3 blog posts through or 3 articles they've written that are all the same, I'm a bit like, do they just write well in the one topic? So like, I try to ask for a product description, like a review, like a big blog post, an article or a listicle, just to see that they've actually got a range and can write about various topics. It's not something I have to do very often though, so sorry.
No, I appreciate that. I think it's a fair point, right? Because we talked a lot about meeting search intent, and this requires different types of articles. And so also, I think the SEO industry for a long time has relied on the listicles very much, and everything just became a listicle, 17 best tip on everything. And so I think seeing that someone can branch out from that and also write different types of content is very valuable input.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. We're reaching the end, so I want to make a quick summary and a few announcements, and then we can say goodbye to the panelists. And so just in terms of like quick summary, I think it's interesting because we started this as an SEO panel, and we have all SEO specialists on the panel. but we ended up talking a lot about branding and voice and search intent. And I think that's one of the big shifts that the SEO industry is making, and that you actually see beautifully reflected in the panel today. And I think the debate from just keyword and how often is the keyword in there, etc., that's not where it's at anymore, at least not in the frontier. And having that color, having that voice, having that nuance is becoming so, so important. Then I also heard that we're all still on spreadsheet, so something's really going on there. And so that's interesting, was also an interesting learning for me. So that the spreadsheet content counter is still very alive and a very appropriate measure to manage in connection with other tools. And then obviously that whole topic of expectation setting and why does content matter and what can we expect from it. And it still takes time, even today, it still takes time to rank. And this is kind of the approach to take. So yeah, just wanted to say thank you all for coming. If you really enjoyed today's discussion, we're going to have another panel, like I said, on figuring out what are keywords to pick, how do I forecast traffic, how can I maybe estimate return on investment, how safe are these predictions that we're going to have on this same time on 13th of July. And Kyle Roof is already confirmed as a panelist, and we're going to have 2 more people joining us. So please mark that in your calendar. And then lastly, I put together a bit.ly link, and now I have to look in my notes. So it's bit.ly/blogger-checklist-SEO. If you want to download a little bit of a content brief SEO checklist, that's just a Google Doc that you can make a copy of, and then that's yours and can get you kind of started for turning your keywords into a content briefing. So that is bit.ly/blogger-checklist-SEO, because that was the only one that was available. And so with that, it's been a very interesting discussion about voice, about emotion, and I'm very excited that the 3 SEOs that I picked today decided to talk about this. And yeah, let us know how you liked the session in the comment. Tune in next time. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you so much, Billie. Thank you, Cecilien. It was really, really good having you all today here with us. Thank you for tuning in, and it's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.